methods, that is run and get. So to set up the code playground for today's session, run this command. It's available below the video. Okay, run this and then the code playground will be set for today's session. So after this, navigate to the my app directory, run the npm install command so that the required dependencies will get installed. So let's do these steps. So here you can see we have few dependencies, right? So these have to be installed. So firstly, we need to navigate to the my app directory. So then we need to run this. So for that, npm install. So this will install all the dependencies that are present. Okay. So there you can see Express, SQLite, SQLite 3, all three dependencies have been installed. Okay. So these steps are done. So we are done with the initial setup and we have seen this result. Okay. So now we can start the server, right? Node index.js now. Okay, so with this, in the goodreads.http, if you send the request, you can find the response for the getbooks API. Okay, so we were done with this API in the previous session, right? So we have seen the response. So let's have a look at this. So in the previous session, in the index.js, so we have seen about initializing the DB and the server, and then we have written the getbooks API also, right? Okay, so for that, let's just check this. So in the goodreads.http, we already have this, right? We just need to send the request and have a look at it. So before that, we need to start the server. So for that, let's do node index.js. Okay, now let's send the request. And then there you can see, we can find the result, right? So this is the getbooks API, right? And we have done this in the previous session. Okay, now let's proceed further to the next API, which is getbook. So where we actually want to fetch the details of a particular book. So let's understand the HTTP request and the response related to this API. So coming to the HTTP request, we want to fetch the details of a particular book, right? So the method is get. Coming to the URL, right? So what is a URL? In case of the getbooks API, the path was /books/, right? So what is a path here? So here, the path should also indicate the specific book that we want to fetch the details, right? So that book also needs to be specified, right, there in the URL. So how do we do that? So for that, we can make use of the path parameter. So there you can see the path /books/book ID. So together, this path can be used to identify a single book resource. So here the book ID is the path parameter. So let's say the path is /books/1. So this indicates that we want to fetch the details of the book with the ID 1. Well, let's say the path is /books/3. Then we want to fetch the details of the book with the ID 3. Okay, clear? So you understood this. So here, in place of this path parameter, we can provide any string as the path parameter. So there you can see :ID, :book ID, :author ID. Then there you can see we have :author ID as one path parameter. Then we have /book/ again we have :book ID. This is another path parameter. So after that you can provide any string. So that together will be the path parameter. Okay, clear? So we understood this, right? So now, what is a URL for the getbook API? So the URL is, so there you can see localhost :3000 /books/:book ID/. Clear? Okay, we understood the path. Okay, now coming to the response. So in the response, we want to send the book details in the body of the HTTP response. Okay, this part is clear. Okay, now let's start writing the API for this. So as we understood, app dot, so it's the HTTP method is get, so get of, and coming to the path. So the path is /books/:book ID. Okay, and then comma, now coming to the handler. So the request and the response are the arguments and we have the arrow function there. Okay, so now what we have to do? We want to fetch the details of a particular book. So how do we know which book it is? Using the path parameter book ID, right? So how do we access it? So for that, so using the request.params, okay, there's a property called params in the request object. So using which we can access the path parameters. Okay, there you can see. Since we just want the book ID, so we are just destructuring the book ID. Okay, so we got the book ID. Okay, so the next step is the SQL query, right? So coming to the SQL query, there you can see, right? We have get book query is nothing but select star from book where the book ID equal to the one that we got from the path parameter, right? So there you can see, we have specified it. Okay, clear? So now we have the SQL query. Now we have to run this SQL query against our database, right? So as we understood, the SQLite package provides us multiple methods to execute the SQL queries on the database. One such method was all. We have seen it previously. Another method is get. Let's understand about this. So the get method is actually used to get a single row from the table. So when we want to fetch a single row from the table, then we can make use of this get method. Okay. So here in our case, we just want the details of a one particular book. So that is a single row. So what we can do, we can just do db.get of and we can provide the SQL query. Okay. So with this, we can extract the single row that we want to get from the table. Okay. Clear? So there you can see. So db.get of, and we have specified the SQL query. Okay. So this will actually give us a promise object. So we have to await on that. So once the promise object is resolved, we will finally get the book details, and it's stored in the book variable. Since we are using await, so the handler function should have the async keyword. There you can see. Okay. So we are done extracting the book details from the database. The next thing is we have to send this as a response to the client, right? So response.send of book. Okay. Done, right? So we are done with writing this API. Okay. Now let's execute this. Let's write this on our own. Okay. So coming to the index.js. Okay. So in the previous session, we were done with the getBooks API. Now in today's session, we are going to write the getBook API. So there you can see. So the HTTP method is get, and coming to the path, it is /books/book ID. Okay, cool. So then coming to the handler function, okay, request, response, and this. So here this :book ID. So this indicates the path parameter. So if there is a colon, right, it indicates that, so this book ID is a path parameter, right? So you understood this. Okay. So now, firstly, to fetch the details of the book, we need to access the book ID from the URL, right? We need to get that path parameter. So these path parameters are present in the request object. So request.params. Okay. So the path parameters are present in this property. So we can destructure that. Okay, so the one that we want is just book ID. So we'll just specify this here. Okay, so here you can see the one that we have specified here is book ID. You should use the same thing here. So to indicate that we want to extract the book ID. Okay, clear? So now we are done fetching the book ID, right? So the next thing is we need to write the SQL query, right? So what is the SQL query? So constant, and then we want to get book query. Okay, so that is, so we want to select star from book, where the book underscore ID is equal to ID that we got. Okay, clear? So this is the SQL query that we need to execute, right? Okay, so now we have the SQL query. The next thing is we have to run this SQL query on the database. So how do we do that? Okay, so here we use db.get. So when we want to just get a single row from the table, right? In that case, we can make use of the get method. Okay, so here we have get. So we'll provide the SQL query. Okay, this is done, right? So this will actually give us a promise object. So we have to await on that. So once the promise object is resolved, so we'll get the book details. Okay, since we are using await, so here we need to specify async. Okay, clear? So now we are going to fetch the details of the book. This part is done. So the next thing is we need to send this as a response, right? So response.send of book. Okay, done. Clear? Okay. So now let's save this, right? Since we made changes to the index.js file. So again, we have to run. Okay. So now let's go to the goodreads.html and test the API. Okay. So here, if you see, there is already written here post and the URL, right? So no, this one, I'm referring to this. So get and this URL /books/1. So here the /1 is the path parameter, right? So we want to fetch the details of the book with ID 1. Okay. So now let's do the send request. Okay, and there you can see we got the details of the book ID 1. Okay, similarly, let's try with some other value, say 3. Okay, let's save this, send request. Now you can see we got the details of book ID 3. Let's try with another value, say 10. Okay, so again, let's do the send request, and you can see we got the details of the book with book ID 10. Right, there you can see. Okay, simple, right? Okay. So we are done with this, right? So we have run the server, when we made the request, and we have seen the response. Okay. So here, every time when we make a change to the index.js file, what we are doing, we are again stopping the server and restarting the server, right? So we have to stop and then again start the server. Do we have to do this all the time? Is there any other way? Yes, there is actually a third-party package called as node.13. So this tool will actually help us by automatically restarting the server whenever there are changes to the file. Okay, so let's say we made some changes in the index.js file. So using this package, so if we run that particular file, so in case we made any changes and saved it, then automatically the server will restart. We need not manually restart the server whenever we make the changes. Okay, so for this, firstly, we need to install this third-party package. So the command is npm install -g node.13. Okay, so here the -g means that this particular package is installed globally. Okay, you need not install this package for each and every project that you're making, right? So if you install it globally, so you can use it in any project that you want. Okay, so it's installed globally when you do this. Okay, so let's install this package. Okay, so I'll just stop the server now. So here the command is npm install -g node mon. Okay, so with this we are installing it globally so we can access it in any project that we want. Okay, clear? So now let's use this. So I have already installed this before, so that's the reason it's up to date. Okay, so in this way, once you install, so it will be get installed. So now when we are going to run the index.js next time, so previously saying say hello world. Okay, I made this change. I've saved this file. So just observe. So since I made some change to the file and saved it, so automatically it was restarting due to the changes. Okay. Now if you do a send request, right? So here you can see we got the response as hello world, right? So you need not always stop the server and again start the server. Automatically it will detect the changes and restart the server again. You just need to save the file, then it will automatically detect the changes. Okay, clear? So we understood this, right? Let's just get this back to book. So again, I have saved it. So the changes were appropriately, it detected and appropriately changed. And now we have the book, right? So this is the advantage with this. Okay. So we understood this, right? So then now from now on, when we run index.js file, we have to run it as node.mon index.js, right? So then we have seen that, right? So we made some small change there. So then automatically it restarted due to the changes. And then you can see the changes that are reflected. Okay, clear? So now we are done with the getBook API, right? So we were able to fetch the details of a specific book. So we have specified the book in the URL using the path parameter, right? So we understood these things. Now let's proceed further to the next API, that is add book, right? So we want to add a new book. So we want to write an API for this. Okay, so let's see the add book API. Since we want to make some changes to the particular database, right? We want to create some data. So here, firstly, we need to send the data that we want to create, right? So let's send the request in the JSON format. Okay, there you can see the title of the book, author ID, rating count, all this. We want to send the data in this manner, okay, in the JSON format. Clear? So coming to the HTTP request and the response. So since we are creating data, so the HTTP method would be post, right? So the HTTP method is post. Coming to the URL, so here we have it as localhost 23000 /book/. So the path is /books/. Okay. The body, so the JSON object that we are going to send, and the content type is application/JSON. Since we want to send the data in the JSON format, so the body is a JSON object and the content type is application/JSON. So for this, the HTTP response would be the book ID. The ID of the book that has been created, right? So once we send the data of the book that we want to add, so appropriately it will get added in the database and ID will be generated for that book, right? So we want to send that ID as the response. Okay, so this is regarding the add book API. Okay, clear? Now let's start implementing this. So here, since we understood, we want to create some data. So the method is post. So we have to use app.post and the path is /books/. Okay, coming to the handler, there you can see request response and the arrow function. Arguments are request and response. Okay, so here, since we are going to get a JSON object as a request object, so we need to specify this line, okay, express.json. We need to use this, okay, because when we write this express.json, so it will recognize that a JSON object will be coming as a request object and appropriately it will parse it. So for that, you need to specify this line before. Okay, so it is this express.json is used to recognize the incoming request object as a JSON object and also accordingly it has to parse it, right? So for this, we have to write this line. So app.use of express.json. Okay, clear? So we have to write this line. Okay, so once we write this line, it will appropriately detect the incoming request object as a JSON object and it will parse it. Now we need to access the request object, right? So the request object is present in the body, right? So request.body will give us the book details that we want to add, right? So the book details is actually present as a JSON object, right? So from this, we need to access the various values like the title, author ID, and so on. So for this, using the object destructuring, we are appropriately accessing the values like the title, author ID, rating, and so on, right? So now in the variable title, we have the title of the book that we want to add. In author ID, we have the author ID, right? Rating, and so on. Okay. So the next thing is we have to write the SQL query, right? So now constant add book query equal to, so then here we are writing the SQL query. So the SQL query is insert into book of and will provide the list of columns, values of, and then we have to provide the list of values. We already have the values present in the variables, right? In the title variable, we have the title. In the author ID variable, we have the author ID and so on. So we are providing these variables. Okay, clear? So using these variables, we are providing the values. the next thing is we need to run this SQL query on the database. So for this, we can make use of the run method. So this run method is actually used to create or update the table data. So when we want to create or update the table data on the database, we have to use the run method. So db.run of, and then we have to provide the SQL query. So when we have to deal with multiple, when we want to fetch the data and when we want to fetch multiple rows, then the method is on. When we want to fetch a single row, then the method is get. When we want to create or an update data, then the method is run. Simple, right? Okay, so here to create, since we are creating the data, the method is run. So db.run of add book query, again it will give us a promise object, so we have to await on that, and once the promise object is resolved, so we will get the response from the db. Okay, so since we are using await, we have to add async. So once we get the response, right, so here we actually want to get the book ID, the ID of the book that has been created in the database, right? So in the book table, so here we are creating a row in the book table. Okay, so here in the book table, the primary key is the book ID that we actually want. So from the DB response, we can access the primary key by writing .last ID. So the last ID will have the primary key of the new row that has been inserted. Okay, clear? So here in this way, we will be getting the book ID that we actually want. Okay, so now we have the book ID. We need to send this as a response, right? So response.send off, and we are creating an object book ID colon book ID. Okay, we are done preparing the HTTP response and we are sending it, right? So this API is also done, right? Clear? Okay, so now let's run this and try it out. Okay, so here, let's come back here. So we are done with the getBooks API. We are done with the getBook API. Now we are going to do the add book API. Okay, so as we understood, right? So it's app dot. So the method is here we want to add a new book into the database, right? So we are creating data. So the HTTP method is post. So app.post of. So here we need to specify the path. So what is a path? It is nothing but /books. Okay. Now again coming to this. So request, response, and then we have the arrow function. Okay. So here. So now we want to add the details. So firstly, we need to access the details that we got in the request body, right? So request. So we can get that by doing request.body. So this will have the JSON object that has been sent in the request body, right? So that we will store it. Okay, book details equal to this. There is one point to note here, right? Since, as we understood, so we want to get the JSON object, right? So from the request that is coming, we need to understand, recognize that it's a JSON object and appropriately parse it, right? So for this, we need to write a statement before this, okay? So let's write that first, okay? So that is app.use of express.json, okay? So here this express.json, so will basically recognize that the request object is a JSON object and appropriately it will parse it, right? So that is the reason it's important to mention this, okay, this line. Okay, then only it will understand that the request object that is coming is a JSON object. Okay, clear? So we need to specify this. Okay, be careful about that. So now we have the book details. Okay, the next thing is from the book details, we need to extract various details like the title and various things. What we could do is, so we can just print the request book details and see. Okay, so I'll just save this. So in the goodreads.html, there is already a thing written. So post and this /books content type is application/JSON and the request object. Right, so there you can see. So when it comes to the request book details that we want to get, so there you can see we have appropriately identified it as a JSON and then we were able to parse it. So here we have the title, author ID and various details. Now we need to extract all of these into variables. So for that, let's do object destructuring. Okay, so we have to write constant title, comma, and then author ID, right? Comma and so on. There are a lot of variables. So you need to write a lot of things, right? So instead of you spending a lot of time in writing these things, we have already provided these queries in the queries.txt file. So just go to queries.txt file. So right now we are working with the add book API. So here already the SQL query related to this is already mentioned. The SQL query and the object destructuring things are already present here. So we can make use of this. Okay. So I'll just copy this part. So it's available for you in your code playground. You can do the same. Okay. So there you can see. Okay. So here we have title, author ID, rating, rating count, review count, like this, various details equal to book details. So we are extracting them and they are present in these variables. The next thing is we have to write the SQL query. So the SQL query is the add book query. So we want to insert into the book and we have written the list of columns, right? So then coming to the values, they are already present in the variables that we have extracted. So we have mentioned them here. Okay. So it's done. So finally, we are done with writing this query, right? Add book query. So after this, now we have to run this query on our database, right? So for that, we have to make use of the command db.run and then we'll specify the add book query. Okay. So now, so we are done with writing this, right? This will return a promise object, right? So await. And then, so we'll store the response that we got, okay, equal to this. So since we are using await, so the handler function should have async, okay. Let's just create this, okay. Now, so we have the response. So, okay, so what we have now, okay, we are done with writing the SQL query, running it, and we got some response. Now, coming to sending the response to the client, what do we want to send? We want to send the book ID, right? So here, how do we access the book ID? Okay, so firstly, let's print the response that we got, okay, console.log of db response, okay, so let's save this. Okay, since we are using the node mod, so automatically, as we have done changes, so it automatically restarted. So you need not restart it again. Okay, so let's run this query. Okay, so you can see the response here, right? So this is the DB response that we got on running this particular query, right? Okay, by running this add book query. So this is a response that we got. So if you observe the response here, we have a variable called last ID here, a property called last ID. So in the last ID, the primary key of the new row inserted will be present. Okay. So here, the book ID itself is the primary key, right? And we want to send that as a response. So from DB response, we can directly access the primary key through this property last ID. Okay. So we can get the book ID. So here, constant book ID is just equivalent to DB response dot last ID. Okay. So in this way, we were able to access the book ID that has been newly added, right? And now we have to send this response, right, as a response. So response.send of. So here we are going to send a JSON object. Okay. So book ID colon book ID. Okay. Clear? So in this way, so we are going to send the object as a response. Okay. So we are done with this. So let's save it. So automatically the server has been restarted. So now let's run. Okay. So and there you can see the book ID is 42. Okay. Clear? So you understood this? Right. Okay. So in this way, we are done creating the book, right? So this is how generally the post requests are made. So whichever detail books that you want to add, whichever data that you want to create, you send that in the body of the HTTP request. So that can be appropriately accessed, right? So using the request.body as we have done here. We got the details. So then appropriately we extract the details that we want. Then we write the SQL query that we want to execute, right? And then run the SQL query on the database and we'll finally get the response and appropriately send the response to the client, right? Simple steps. Okay. So this is also done. Okay. So there you can see. So in the goodreads.htdp, already we have written these things. So otherwise you can make some changes to that data and again create a new book, right? So and then once you run, we have seen this result, right? Clear? Okay, so you also give this a try. It's important that you practice all of these things, right? So once you practice, you'll be able to easily understand about the various steps and you can break down the steps and at each and every place you can add console log statements and see what's happening also. Okay, clear? So now let's proceed further. So we are done with the AdBook API, right? So in the AdBook API, while writing that, we have seen about how we can handle the post requests, right? So now let's proceed further to the update book where we are going to handle the update requests, right? Okay, so here what we want to do is we want to update some details of a book, right? So in this API, so this API is related to updating some details of the book. Okay, so for that, coming to the URL, right? So we have to specify the book, to which we want to update the details, right? The book of which we want to update the details. So here we are going to make use of the path parameter as we have done previously, /books/:book ID. So in this way, we'll specify the book that we want to update. Okay, clear? So then as you can see, /book/1, it means that we are indicating the book with ID 1 and so on. Okay, so here in this case, so the HTTP method is put, right? So as we understood for the update request, so the HTTP method is put. Okay, and coming to the URL, so it is they say localhost colon 3000 and the path is /books/book ID. And coming to the body, so the body will contain the JSON object, right, which will have the details of the details that we want to update. Okay, clear? So in this way. So then coming to the content type, since we are sending a JSON object in the body, so the content type will be application/JSON. Okay, this is regarding the HTTP request. Now coming to the HTTP response. So for this, in the response body, we want to send book updated successfully. This message, book updated successfully. Okay, clear? So you understood the HTTP request, right? It's a put method, right? Since we are making some changes to the existing data. And the URL path is /book/book ID. And in the body, we are going to send the JSON object with the details that we want to update. And coming to the content type, it is application/JSON. And in the response, we'll send a message in the body as book is being updated successfully. Okay. So here the method is put. So app.put off, and coming to the path, it is /books/book ID. Okay. Clear? So coming to the handler, request response. So here what we have to do. Okay. So there is some information that we want to update. Okay. So previously, let's say the rating was 4.62. Now let's say the updated rating is 5. Similarly, let's say previously the rating count was some 1 to 6 so and so. Now we want to update it as some 10, 0, 0, 0 something. Okay. Clear? Reviews count. So there are some details that we want to update. So okay. So that we can access using the request.body. So firstly, we need to first access the book ID, right? How do we do that? Using request.params, right? As we previously understood, using request.params, we can access the path parameters. So book ID is a path parameter, so using which we are accessing the book ID. So then the book details, the updated book details, we can access them through the request.body. We have already understood these, right? So we'll get the book details. So we got the book ID, that is the ID of the book which we want to update using the request.body. So we got the details of the book, the updated details of the book, right? So now from the book details, we have to access each of these values. So through object destructuring, we'll access the values. It's just similar to how we have done in the AdBook API, accessing the details. And then appropriately, we have to write the SQL query for it. When it comes to the updation, so as we previously understood, update, book, set, and then we'll set the value. So title is equal to, and then since we have the value in the title variable, we are accessing it and mentioning it there. Author ID equal to this, rating equal to this, and so on, right? So where the book ID should be the one that we have specified in the path parameter, right? That is the filter condition. So we are done with writing the SQL query, right? So the next thing is running the SQL query. What is a method used to run this SQL query? As we previously understood, so to create or update data, the method is run. So here, since we want to update the table data, the method that we have to use is run. So db.run of SQL query. So there you can see db.run of SQL query, that is update book query. Okay, this will again give us the promise object. We are awaiting on that. So since it's await, so we have the async. Okay, so once the await is done, there is no response that we want from there. Okay, we just want to send a message saying that updation is successful. So we have the response.send off and we are writing the message. Okay, clear? So you understood this, right? Here, it's all the things that we have learned previously. We just have applied it together, right? So now let's write this API and understand again. Okay. So here, coming to the index.js, so we are done with getBooks API, getBook API, and the AdBook API. The next thing is we want to update. So it's update book API. Okay. So it's app dot. Since we are going to make changes to the existing data, it's a update request, right? So the HTTP method here is put. So app.put. Coming to the path, it is /books. Here we need to specify the book that we want to update, right? So we do that using the path parameter, :book ID. Okay, /. So this is the path. Okay, now coming to the request, response, and then here. Now coming to this. Firstly, we need to find the book ID, right, from the path parameters. How do we do that? Request.params. This will give us the book ID that is present in the path parameter. Okay. So let's store that constant book ID equal to this. Okay. So we want to destructure it. There might be other things. So done. We got the book ID. So once we got the book ID, the next thing is, so the updated details of the book are passed in the request body. So we have to access them. So request.body will give us the updated book details. So let's store them. So constant book details equal to this. Okay. So we got the book details now. Okay. So from this, we need to access each of the values, right? So constant. So here we have title, author, right? So there are a lot of details. So as we understood, we have something called queries.txt, right? So here in this, so here you can see there is update book. So here we have the various details. So for the restructuring also, the command is present here. Okay. So let's just copy that here and then mention it here. Okay. So there you can see. So here we had actually an error because I was saving it somewhere in between where there was an error in the code. Okay, so we got the book details. The next thing is we need to basically write the SQL query. So already the SQL query is also present here. Do understand the SQL query and then copy paste it, right? It's important because later on you have to write these SQL queries. So but right now our object is not about SQL queries. Okay, so I'm just copying this. Okay, so done. We have written the SQL query too. So now we have to run this SQL query. As we understood, when it comes to creating or updating the data, the method is run. So we have to write db.run of, and then we have to specify update book query. Okay. So the db.run update book query. So this returns a promise object. So we are going to await on that. So once this is done, so we want to send the response as updated book updation successful. Book updated successfully. Okay. Some success response. Okay, we want to give this. Okay. So here we actually have to mention async here. Okay. So now, since we have used await, we have to mention async here. So we are done with this. And finally, we are sending this response. Clear? Okay. So here, another point to note, when we are actually accessing the request body, since we have written this line here, express.json, so it will understand us as a JSON object. So it could be for adding or updation, anything. In the body, if you're sending a JSON object, it's important to write this line. So be conscious about that whenever you are having a JSON object. Okay, clear? So this is done, right? Okay, so now, so let's execute. So this will automatically restart, so that won't be an issue. So now in the goodreads.http, so here we already have the request. So put, then we have the URL /book/save41, that particular book, and the content type is application/JSON, and these is the body, right? Clear? The updated details. So now let's run this. So there you can see we got the result as book updated successfully. Okay, clear? So now what you could do, you could fetch request of this particular book and check whether the details have been updated properly or not, right? So you can always play around with this, right? So right now the book details that we have updated is 41, right? So let's fetch the details of this particular book. Okay, so let's do send request. And now let's check whether the details have been updated properly or not. Okay. So there you can see the author ID is 1. So the rating has been changed to 5 and it has been appropriately reflected. So here the count also has been appropriately reflected. The review counts also have been appropriately reflected, and there you can see. So the data is exactly the same as we wanted to update, right? So there you can see, right? Okay. So we are done with writing the getBooks API, getBook API, addBook API, and now even the updateBook API, right? So because of the strong foundations that we have established previously, now we are able to write multiple number of APIs in a very easy way. We already know the SQL queries, we already know the programming, how to write all of these, and the JavaScript. So now it has become really easy for us to write all of these APIs, right? Okay, now let's proceed further. We have already seen about this and tested this API. So we got this result as book updated successfully. So updateBook API is done, right? Now, another API is deleting the book, right? So let's see about this. Here, we are going to see about the delete HTTP request. Okay. So in the delete book API, as we understood, so here we want to delete, right? So the HTTP method would be delete. Coming to the URL, so it's /book/, we need to specify the book that we want to delete. So we'll use the path parameter. So /:book ID. Okay, clear? Now, in the response body, we want to send a message saying that book deleted successfully. Okay, clear? So now, the method is delete. Okay, app.method there. In the method place, you have to use delete. Okay, so app.delete off, and coming to the path, it is /book/:book ID. Okay, clear? So then coming to the handler, there you can see request response, right? So there, firstly, we need to access the book ID. So request.params. So from that, we are accessing the book ID. So then coming to the SQL query, so it's delete from book where book ID equal to, and you have to specify the book ID that we got from path parameters, right? Clear? Simple. Now, we have to run this SQL query on the database. So here, for this, we will make use of the run method itself. Since we are making changes to the table data, that could be creating, updating, deleting, in all of these cases, we'll make use of the run method. So dd.run off, and then we'll provide the query, which is delete book query. So this will actually give us a promise object. So await async. Okay. So this will basically delete the book from the database. So now, if you send the response, what do we have to do? Book deleted successfully. We want to send this response. So there you can see, right? That message, response.send of this. Okay, done. This SQL query is also done, right? Looks very simple, right? So it's just the concepts that we have learned so far. We just need to apply them everywhere. Okay, clear? So let's give this also a try. So I'll just close this. Coming to the index.js, right? So here you can see the APIs that we are done so far. Now we are going to have another API, right? Which is delete book API. Okay. So app.the HTTP method is delete. So delete of, coming to the path, it is slash books slash, here we need to specify the book ID, the ID of the book that we want to delete, right? So colon book ID. Okay, slash. So this is the path, right? Now coming to this, so it is handler. So it's request, response are the arguments, obviously, right? So now, so from the path, we need to access the book ID, right? So it is request.params. So we can get path parameters from the request.params. So here constant, so it's book ID equal to this request.params. Now we got the book ID. So we have to delete this. So we have to write the corresponding SQL query for it. So constant, so delete book query equal to, so coming to the query. So here the SQL query is, so delete from, so we want to delete from book where, so here the book ID should match, right? So book underscore ID equal to dollar book ID that we got from the path parameters. Okay, so we are done with this. So now we have to run this SQL query on the database. Since we are going to make changes to the data, we have to make use of the run method. So db.run. Okay, so then we have to provide the query, that is delete book query. So we need to await on this. So here we'll provide async. So here the SQL query is, so delete from, so we want to delete from book where, so here the book ID should match, right? So book underscore ID equal to dollar book ID that we got from the path parameters. Okay, so we are done with this. So now we have to run this SQL query on the database. Since we are going to make changes to the data, we have to make use of the run method. So db.run. Okay, so then we have to provide the query, that is delete book query. So we need to await on this. So here we'll provide async. Okay. So now once this operation is successfully done, we need to send a message as a response to the client. So response dot send of book deleted successfully. Okay. So that is a message that we want to send. Okay. Clear? So this is done. So there you can see. These are all the concepts that you have learned so far. Request.params, accessing the path parameter, then SQL query, you already know about this. Then while running, you have to just use db.run method. And then finally, you need to send the response. Okay, clear? So now let's save this. Okay, automatically it got restarted. So coming to this. So there is already this written, right, to delete. So now let's run this. Okay, send request. And there you can see we got the response as book deleted successfully. Okay, clear? So this is also easy, right? So we are done with the delete request too. Okay, clear? So there you can see. Okay, so we have seen this response. So we are done with this API too. So now let's see about the next API, which is get author books. So we want to get the books related to a particular author, right? So let's have a look at the HTTP request and response. So coming to the request, we want to fetch the details. So the method is get. Coming to the URL, /authors/ author ID. We need to specify the author ID. So we have that path parameter. So we want to get the books related to that author. So /books. So that is the path. /authors/ author ID /books. So coming to the API call, so app.get, right, off, and coming to the path /authors/ author ID /books/. Okay, and then to the handler, request, response, and then now firstly we need to access the author ID. So we get that from request.params, that's a path parameter, right? Okay, so we got the author ID. So now using this, we have to write the SQL query. So we want to get all the books related to an author. Okay, so where from select star from book where the author ID equal to, and we'll specify the author ID. Okay, clear? So we'll get the author books query. This is done. Okay, so now we have to run this on the database, right? So for this, what is a method that we have to use? You tell me. So here, when it comes to fetch, we have two methods. One is all, another method is get. So all deals with multiple rows. When the result has multiple rows, then we have to use all. If the result is just a single row, if we are fetching only a single row, then we have to make use of get. So here, what is the result? How many rows will we have? Multiple, right? More than one, right? So we have to make use of the all method. So db.all of, and you'll specify the query, await, it'll give a promise object. So then finally, we'll get the books array. And then that array, we will send it as a response, right? So now if you just do the send request, so you'll get a response in this manner. You can give this a try. Okay, after the session, try this out. Okay, so in this way, we are done with the get author books API too. So we are done with various APIs related to the goodreads.com, right? So we have covered various concepts here, right? Let me summarize those. So we have seen about the third-party package node mod, right? So then we have seen about the SQLite methods, get and run. So using these, we were able to get various APIs written, right? So we have seen about the path parameters, accessing them through request.params. Then we have seen how to send the body, request body, and then how to access it. So where express.json, through which it will recognize that it's a JSON object, right? So then through this, we'll access the request body, and then appropriately we can run the SQL queries. And then we have seen various methods to run the SQL queries on the database, right?